GM fam, today is March 29th, 2024. Today is the first day of the rest of our lives, and we sincerely hope that you make it your greatest one yet. So, in the
I
face of
like it.
adversity, we are gathered here today to party. Today, our Llama party is themed Hooves for Hope, as the community is still recovering from yesterday's tragic events. If you missed it, it's a really terrible day for all decent people. Because on the same day that SBF was getting off with a relative slap on the wrist, fans of the flywheel might have noticed that Prisma Finance was exploited for losses in the range of $9 million. Thankfully, this is isolated to Prisma. It was for a vault migration ZAP contract they'd created, so its predecessor, Liquidity Finance, was unaffected. And the protocol's two stablecoins, MKUSD and Ultra, both appeared to hold peg despite some initial turbulence. So there'd been a little communication with the hacker, spurring some hopes that there might be a white hat recovery. But the hacker also tornadoed about 1,000 ETH, so hopes are a little bit slim there. We'll get into all this and a lot more. But here to join us for all the news that's fit to Flywheel, we had to get the absolute best in. So we brought in two fantastic guests we're really excited with. To start with, the greatest live streamer on the planet, Noah. Could you introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen of the crypto space, for Live on a Friday, March 29th. Hot topic, obviously, is meaningful when money is affected, people's money. And I'm sure we'll go back and forth thinking over the effects it has had, the effects it will have, and the potential outcomes. But for the folks that don't know me, there's only rationality here. None of that hype and hyperbole. We'll have fun.
Yeah, this is gonna be really fun. And then from Yearn Finance, a core dev, and also one of the world's foremost Prisma experts, Wavey.
Hey guys, happy to be here. Thanks for the invite. And yeah, like Curve Cap said, I'm Wavy, joining from Urine Finance, and yeah, happy to be here.
So I think we should get started by chatting about the news with Prisma. Of course, it was like a pretty bleak, $9 million erased. What's the prospects that you guys see at the moment? Is it going to be recovered, or do you think this is going straight to North Korea?
Well, 1,000 going through tornado, that's pretty clear cut and dry. I don't think we were debating about that component. But if a white hat has recovered a fair amount, there's still significant damage from a narrative standpoint, losses of capital from a financial standpoint. Um, but the pegs are there, so that means something. So the most important thing is to always look at what is, not what people think is the opinion. The opinion matters, but quantitatively, things look interesting, stronger than plenty of peers and plenty of other protocols that have gone through scenarios of an unfortunate nature.
Yeah, Wavy, could you talk a bit through what exactly was going on at Prisma at the time this happened? Like there was some migrations that were going on, and I know you've delved more into these contracts than almost anyone.
Yeah, um, yeah. So I'll start by saying Prisma is a fork of the Liquidity protocol, which is famously immutable. Um, Prisma has made a few changes, right? So rather than only ETH as collateral, you can deposit ERC20s. All of their collaterals happen to be LSTs or LRTs. Um, and one of the changes they made is for uh, to add some governance in there so that they can perform upgrades on the protocol. And specifically, there was a recent upgrade to add new trove managers. So they made some modifications and feature improvements to uh, you know to how users can sort of manage their collateral and basically the protocol itself. And it, and they're now in the process of getting users to migrate from the old version to the new version. Um, and while the core protocol is fine and all that code is good, unfortunately, it was the migration tool. People are referring to it as the ZAP contract. to get those user positions closed in the original version and reopened on the new version. And that tool just lacked a couple checks for some call data that gets passed in, and allowed an attacker to perform a really clever sort of strategy to extract some portion of that migrated collateral. So to be clear, the only affected and vulnerable contract is that ZAP, and users who approved it for migration would become vulnerable. But for now, the protocol is now paused. The emergency multisig paused that, and the team's kind of rushing together to get some communications out and a strategy to move forward. So yeah, I'd have to look.
Some people still haven't disabled the zap, right?
Yeah, that's right. I think as sort of and you may see this in some communications soon, but disabling that zap is like paramount importance, right? Because the zap is vulnerable, and as long as a user has that approved, their position can be messed with. And that is true if you, like, even if you closed your position and walked away, you still want to revoke it, because if you ever come back with that same wallet and want to use Prisma again, you may still be vulnerable. So it is very important that people listen to the team and track their announcements and make sure that that revoke transaction has been sent.
Oof, heavy stuff. So, okay, so like my understanding is that some of the excess collateral is drained, but all the stable coins ended up still fully backed, right? And this is why MKUSD and Ultra both recovered their peg so quickly.
Yep. Yeah, there was no bad debt created in the incident, right? So no free minting of MKUSD or Ultra. Even though there were flash loans involved, there was no sort of accounting issue that ever led to any bad debt. It was just sort of a manipulation attack by the attacker to siphon out a portion of the user's collateral. So the impact to the protocol at large was very low. It's just the specific users that got targeted that experienced the loss.
Now, what does it mean that the protocol has been paused? I thought we are talking about a like decentralized protocol that no one owns. How is it possible that you can pause it?
Yeah, and this is actually one of the modifications that was made to Liquidity, I believe. That it was basically this introduction of emergency multisig, and the pause effect basically just it's sort of like a blocker from new TVL coming in. So it does not impact anybody from removing their collateral or paying back their debt. They can always safely exit, but it is just a blocker on new collateral coming in or new new stable coins being minted. So as you can imagine, right, that has been extremely useful in this situation, because the attack relied on being able to do those things. So as long as it's paused, we're in a safe state.
It engaged slow mode, where people actually have a moment to breathe and think about next steps.
Yep. And for the for the postmortem to come out and the communication strategies and all that kind of stuff to get us to a safe place before reopening.
Now, are they going to do postmortems in the most remarkable way possible, the way Yearn has paved the Wavey for? When Yearn did those postmortems back a couple of years ago, we've never seen anything like that in the crypto space. We've seen that in dev space, in my world, in mobile software and desktop software. But that was the first time we ever saw such rigorous, well constructed work. And I think you really set the stage, the team set the stage for where things need to be.
Yes, I appreciate that. Even though I didn't start doing that, I definitely had a hand in writing several of those, and I think they're always met with good reception, and the transparency is appreciated by users. And to be honest, they're great artifacts for people new to the space or trying to be more technical to actually learn and kind of pick up security chops. So yes, the Prisma postmortem will be to that same level of detail, equally as transparent, everything. There were a couple of Yearn contributors that actually had a hand in that, but also the Prisma team was helpful too.
Very interesting.
So, yeah, would you say that okay, Liquidity is like extremely decentralized. I don't think that they even have these kind of like slow mode capabilities built into Liquidity, because it just was deployed. It's out there. Would you say that this is sort of like a vindication of that model, where like you deploy something and it's completely immutable, or like what's your take on this kind of decentralization of Liquidity versus Prisma debate?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I mean, being immutable is not safety from bugs or errors, right? So, I mean, that Zap contract is immutable and it has a bug in it, so that bug is immutable forever, right? So, um, immutable doesn't really solve it. I think what Prisma's sort of promise to users is, and what their product aims to, at least the space in the market that it aims to fill, is having this ability to upgrade, to ship new features. If there's if there's new ideas on how to make this lending market something better, and give users what they want, or adapt, or maybe add new collaterals, it's pretty powerful uh, from a perspective of wanting to have a competitive advantage and all that. So
Because
yeah, so in my opinion,
LSTs can change, right? Like they are themselves not immutable. So if you're accepting LSTs or even LRTs, like you sort of need the ability to adapt.
Well, mutation is, uh, for instance, when you have something to register against, you could add additional modules. So troves you could stack on and they register to a core implementation, at least structurally. I don't know the technical details of the implementation, but extensibility, I guess that could be described as mutability. So even immutable can be mutated by extension, depending on the architecture of the implementation. And that's really the way, look at Curve, add new pool, add new pool. But fundamentally,
yeah,
there's a great degree of immutability. It's a great conversation because it comes down to trust, depending on what can be mutated and where, introduces different degrees of trust, which is often overlooked by the vast majority of the space, as Chris Black loves to talk about, and he's quite correct in many regards. And we want to minimize our trust. And the more we minimize our trust, the more risk we alleviate. And that's ultimately the core of macro financial thinking is risk adjusted exposure to financial opportunity.
yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because you know there are different kinds of immutability, right? So you see some protocols that just have an upgradable proxy sort of front ending the entire protocol, right? Like, some developers on a multi-sig somewhere can just switch the implementation up and rug everything. Now, that's not the case with Prisma at all. In fact, their protocol is extremely immutable. Um, the only difference with Liquidity is that you can add, like you said, new modules, new trove managers. Um, all that stuff is gated by governance. So there's at least several days lead time before any sort of breaking changes can happen. But yeah, if you look at the core contracts of Prisma, there's nothing that somebody can rug pull you on. They do take immutability very seriously, and the code is designed maximally so that no small group of people can do anything. The greatest extent of that is what we saw yesterday with the emergency DAO, which is just the ability to pause the protocol and block new collaterals from coming in. And yeah, they have no access to funds, anything like that. It's just a safety measure.
This is quite a lot of development for something that's sometimes derided as a mere liquidity fork.
Oh no, that's not a liquidity fork. Liquidity is pure Ethereum. This is, look at all the collateral types, which is not necessarily exponentially more sophisticated, but there's significantly more consideration.
Yeah, and I know Wavey, you've really been following a lot of the experiments that Prisma's been running because it kind of has more capability to adjust different parameters for, like, for example, like fees and redemption rates.
Yep. Yeah, and I love Liquidity. It's a great protocol. But one of the challenges they had is setting all these little parameters at deploy time several years ago, right? So a lot of stuff changes in DeFi, as we all know. At Prisma, I know they were kind of playing with some parameters to help minimize the Oracle extractable value. So there's a parameter that is called redemption fee, and see what, you can adjust the level of fee that people performing redemptions have to pay, and therefore, that has some interaction with the Oracle price and so forth. The idea is that we want to minimize that Oracle extractable value, and Liquidity probably had a non-optimal setting there. So yeah, so little things like that I think allows governance to experiment and eventually arrive at what is right for the protocol.
It's the interest rate, and it's all about interest rates, because how do you create buy pressure for the stables? And that's how you repeg. That is probably the biggest complexity, is certain fixed interest rates I don't process financially, maybe technically if there was a conversation to be had. But clearly the only way to get buy pressure in MKUSD and Ultra is higher interest rates, forcing people to purchase it to repay debt, which increases collateralization ratio, so on and so forth. But simply because people don't want to pay the higher interest rate. And that's how you control the peg. So that is one of the that I think regarding slow to adjust interest rates. That is one of the things I favor with regard to other. That'd be an interesting improvement. Maybe that is something that's considerable from a governance standpoint, and be a little bit fast. A governance proposal from 3 to 4 to 5. How do you get up to 10, 15, 20, depending on market conditions?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Wavey, could you talk us through some of the experiments Prisma was running around the time of I have the MKUSD price, which mid-February kind of, I know Prisma made some tweaks and it caused basically the peg to drift down a couple of cents and then it drifted back up. What experiments was Prisma running at the time that might have contributed to this?
Oh man, I have to go back on my memory, and I'm low on sleep. But my recollection is basically it might have aligned with some of these announcements from Maker, and just my theory is just the general interest rate environment that we're all living in today. With DAI, it's getting up to it's 15%, but roughly I mean, it's safe to say 10% plus on the market, and Prisma had these troves that were lending at only 4%, and that is most of their TVL is in these troves that are lending 4%, and it's hard cap, so we couldn't even push it up higher. And of course, the problem with that is when interest rates are 10% plus, and you've got a 4% lender, everyone wants to use that lender. So what happens when everyone wants to use this lender is people kind of crowd into that trade. They mint their MKUSD, and the first thing they want to do with it, right, is go dump it and then get DAI where they can get 15%. And so that carry trade is just going to make them money, right? But if everyone's performing the same carry trade, that's just a ton of sell pressure on MKUSD because it's a bunch of it's getting minted and then it's all getting dumped. So it was actually really good to see the, Prisma governance took action. In fact, these were the early steps to lead us where we are today. It was basically, a new Trove manager was released that removed that 4% interest rate max cap.
That makes sense.
And yep. And those were deployed, I guess, last week. And that migration tool got shipped. And that's what users use to get from the old to the new. And of course, we know how that story ended. The Zap had the bug in it.
Crypto, all bridges lead to North Korea.
Oh, dear. In fact, I wouldn't use the word dumped. Stable coins are designed to be spent. It's not necessarily an asset, albeit all units are assets of sorts, but just semantics I take pause on. And I would just say spent is more appropriate for things that are to be dollars.
Yes, they spent them for other dollars.
Well, that's another story. That's a carry trade. But if we want to talk carry trade, the biggest one is Japan, and that's a whole other story. Imagine doing what Prisma's doing, and others for that matter, with trillions of dollars. So, it's going to be interesting.
We should get into that because you are the foremost macroeconomic expert, at least among the two of us. I don't know if Wavey is also a macro expert, but
Definitely
you were saying
not.
earlier, like you were saying earlier, how things change so much in DeFi, and it's true. As like Wave evidence, we have a photo of Noah from just a couple of years ago here. Let's see if I can bring this up on screen. Look at that! You look so boyish and youthful.
That's amazing. I love it.
Oh my, the good old days. Those memes are great, and what you could do with AI is just wild.
But then here you are as the architect, more serious, somber look. No, why don't you talk a bit about some of the big macro changes that you've been seeing that have been unfolding, not even just over the past few years, but past few months and weeks. It's been a fairly hectic and chaotic time in the entire planet. How does that ripple into DeFi?
We are at a point in time that's the result of the last 2 years of macroeconomic movement. And that could be expressed in terms of predominantly what's used as collateral for the world. And we talk about collateral types on Prisma, and we talk about endogenous collateral types in the crypto space. But in the rest of the world, the overwhelmingly vast majority of collateral is not even just United States debt. It's long duration, post 10-year. And if you look at the volatility of that debt, which is the price point, which would be akin to the price point of Bitcoin and other collateral forms and LSDs for that matter at this point. Ethereum and the LSDs, not really the Bitcoin too much. I would hope that increases proportionally. But that volatility causes a couple of obvious effects. If Ethereum's price significantly adjusting 10, 20, 30, 40%, how does that affect lending and borrowing? How does that affect interest rates? Just think in terms of Prisma or CRVUSD or Maker for that matter. And that induces fear. And when people are fearful of collateral price volatility, they don't borrow because everything is revolves around risk and the perception of risk and potential liquidation. But it's so much more in macroeconomics because you're dealing with trillions upon trillions of dollars. You're not dealing with 100 MKUSD loans. You're dealing with 100 billion or trillion. So it gets pretty interesting. So we're in an environment right now, macroeconomics, where volatility in the collateral markets finally rolling over. And it's just now. I mean, it's literally this week. In fact, the 3-month close on the bond market volatility indicator is today. And it's the repercussion of 2 years of insane volatility finally technically rolling over. So today's going to be an actual crazy day. I look forward to my stream a little bit. But there's one other thing that was crazy. I mean, it's all crazy, like BTFP, and you get into a lot of technical details. But the two biggest things is the bond market volatility, collateral volatility, and Japan with their interest rate hike, which is marginal and trivial because you still got a carry trade. You're going from a base 10 basis points, 0.1% to the U.S. at 5%. That doesn't change much of anything, but it changes things at the margins because whoever was levered 100 to 1 might have to drop it down to 90, 80, so on and so forth. It does change the margins, doesn't change the core of the carry trade, but it certainly does have an effect. And more importantly, is the relative currency pricing. So the interest rate goes up a little bit, it should strengthen the yen. And what they're hoping is they don't have an unwind of the carry trade, which I don't think happens considering this interest rate spread. Carry trade is just huge, 0.1 to 5%. But if they strengthen the yen, that means you're decreasing the value of the dollar relatively. And that's huge. Folks are under, the only one who uses the right words is probably Raul, not even Mike Howell. Mike Howell talks liquidity very well, but there's not enough comfortable or confident sentiment about where the heck we're heading with regard to this cycle. It's it's heading to a place that few have seen, and this is the first time in what 16 years Japan has raised rates, and the dollar's rolling over, and bond market volatility is rolling over. And there's the amount of treasuries that the United States Treasury has to print this year. I'm only 40, but I can look back in data, and we've never seen conditions that we're heading into, especially towards the end of this year. 25 is a little bit still murky in my mind. Raul says it's pretty interesting still. We'll see when we get there. But holy shit, the wall of money towards the end of 25 is pretty spectacular. And it's because of how that move indicator works and the way collateral works. And when you understand how money is printed using collateral, depending on volatility, being respectful of interest rates, you just see a waterfall of causality that says things are going to get weird.
So is weird just what does it mean for my bags if I'm on chain? Like, is liquidity gonna be flowing into crypto, chasing yields there?
My
No one
inspection
knows.
well, I could say that bonds are money. Money prints dollars, which are currency. Dollars are not money. Dollars are currency units. And you could think great in terms of Ethereum borrowing MKUSD. The collateral is a money. The money prints a currency, and the currency is for spending purposes. So if you take that at the macroeconomic level, at a 10 to 1 leverage, which seems pretty neutered from the way global debt is consumed, you're talking about $100+ trillion getting added to the global financial system this year. So if you do 10 to 1, it's 100, and 50 to 1, it's about 100 to 600 trillion dollars getting added to the global financial system, considering the amount of money that's going to be printed by Treasury. And this is all separate from a Bitcoin narrative of how much debt they're piling on, sustainability of debt, and that's all gross and disgusting and all, and we could all agree on that. But this is what's going to happen like in the short term. And that has some pretty weird implications because just like when change happens at the margins with the carry trade go 0.1 to 5 is still a massive carry trade instead of minus 0.1 to 5. But um, that is, the amount that they have to print is so extraordinary. It's going to be pretty interesting compared to 2020.
I mean,
Big
2020 was
changes.
already interesting enough.
It was very different. It was very different because there was a lot of monetization, and it's not like it came out of Treasury. That was emergency spending bill, and it was very domestic to the U.S. It was very different than what's about to play out. Like this is pure Treasury print to pay off. They have to pull in $10.8 trillion to pay $10.8 trillion to people that are owed those amount of dollars. So that what does that do? Instead of Ethereum being the deposit to borrow MKUSD, now it's dollars being the deposit because the bonds are getting repaid. So it's literally like deleveraging the system and de-risking the system. It's important to inspect M0 as well. As M0 goes up, it's very misunderstood. It's very much a deleveraging of the system. It's not really the printing of money, as people would argue.
Interesting stuff. Interesting stuff.
And then the crossover to crypto is so. What's at the margins? If 100 to 600 trillion dollars have to get printed globally, or are going to get printed globally, considering a variety of mechanisms, the amount of potential money that rolls into crypto markets is quite extraordinary because all you need is a 0.5%, 1%. But look at the stage we're on with the ETFs and what does the ETFs do for the entire space? And then when the money managers realize there's 15% running around in the crypto markets, because that'll get crowded out real quick because that's a hell of a carry trade. If you could borrow from the U.S. government at 5% and get 15% on Maker, so but then things start to adjust, and it's all just carry trades. But that also drives a huge amount of capital into the market, and that huge amount of capital has a tremendous effect on micro caps. One of the most interesting things is what everyone in crypto markets think is big money. When you got half a billion-dollar protocols that are thought of as, oh, these are big protocols, they've made it. They're micro caps. One of my tamest expectations is top 100 was about a bill back in 21. Top 100 isn't going to be a bill market cap. Top 100 is going to double-digit bill market cap.
Yeah, I definitely agree that the space that we're looking at now is just going to be like silly undervalued. But
The expansion.
so yeah, no, I'm kind of want to drill back to one of your points that I'm like curious about. So like 5% is the risk-free rate in TradFi, and thanks to the DSR in crypto, it's like 15% is considered risk-free. How risk-free is that really in your mind? Because like Terra Luna was laughed at for promising 20% risk-free stable yields, and
You see, it's risk-free, just not dollar denominated. And that introduces a complexity because every dollar, you could basically say that every dollar on the planet has an interest rate associated with it, which is so not understood. Dollars aren't what people think they are. It's like every MKUSD or every CRVUSD. The only reason it exists is because there's an interest rate associated with that currency unit existing. Um, and that it just goes so much bigger in macroeconomics. Um, what was the
bringing
thought
it up
again?
on screen here, it's like 25 to 35% is the rate that people are borrowing supplying crypto as collateral to borrow Curve USD right now.
That's the most remarkable. So yes, it slows down lending, but you have to. And what matters is lendiness. What matters is peg. What matters is trust. And great, it slows it down, but that number is doing it for a purpose, because that's all that matters. You talk about a stable coin, you talk about like protocol and liquidity and the capacity to manage peg, which is more so what Frax does, where they have like dominant protocol and liquidity, and like 100% of all Frax in the wild can be sold, and they still have a capacity to manage peg because of POL. But this is a different architecture, and that high increasing interest rate doesn't force, but it highly incentivizes persons to purchase CRVUSD to decrease or increase their collateralization ratio, to decrease their potential losses. And that's an extraordinary mechanic. That automated response that Mitch devised, I would say, is what is an extraordinary innovation from a pure fundamental financial perspective.
Yeah, I think it's like what's one of the things like most cool about it is that like some people like say, oh, it's like too volatile, but it's actually like perfect because it's in real time. And if you're in a platform that it's static, then you, the user, have to basically react because the market is actually fluctuating that quickly. Um,
It's
just
too
real
volatile.
quickly, just wanted to point out like some breaking news on that front real quick. We can get back to you're about to say. Curve Llama Land, which is one of the offshoots of this law mechanic, just launched on Arbitrum. So that's kind of exciting news here. Sorry, no, I interrupted you. Just had to get the scoop in there.
This is the same thing. It's brilliant. The responsiveness, the mechanic, because that interest rate is perceived from a borrower standpoint, and the underlying ultimate interest of the borrower is risk. It's the psychological consideration, and that risk is purely expressed by the capacity of that dollar unit being relatively a dollar in value. So it will introduce friction or inhibition to acquire debt at the increased rates, but it protects the protocol. And that is the single sentence that defines the crypto markets, the core innovation of the crypto markets. It comes back to immutability versus degrees of mutability, protecting the infrastructure over the debtor. That is the antithesis of what financial institutions do in meat space. In meat space, if you borrow $1 million, it's your problem. If you borrow $100 billion, it's the bank's problem. But in crypto, you can't borrow $100 billion because you either need appropriate collateral or there has to be that capacity for the protocol to extend that degree of credit. You have to be respective of interest rates, and interest rates are going to be set to protect the protocol. Taking the alleviation of the subjectivity is what changes everything in financial terms, not just crypto terms. This is a financial economy, an emerging market economy. There's no the FOMC saying, "Oh, we gotta lower rates or raise rate." No, raise it to 30%. The damn peg's slipping. Raise the rates. Raise them now. Sorry, I get excited about the topic.
I'm going to bring this conversation back to Prisma real quick, actually, so that we can take a look at the rates here and maybe see if we can figure out what's going on with this sort of difference, because we see CB ETH2 V2 is APR between 139% and 279%, versus our ETH, which is or sorry, SFRAX ETH is lowest at 0.02% to 0.05%. Wavey, do you have any idea what's going on with this?
Not diluted.
No, that's a good question. I didn't notice this, but I'm guessing if we just look across all these different Trove managers, the minted MKUSD value is super low in that particular one. So we see about 4 million across the board for each, except only 16K in CB ETH. So assuming somebody voted on the gauge to give emissions to debt holders in that manager with reasonably sized votes, it's all those emissions are just getting spread to 16K worth of TVL. I assume that's what's going on.
Yeah. And the vault's paused at the moment, so maybe that has something to do with it.
Yeah, exactly. Even if somebody wanted to come in and arb that, they couldn't. So.
That's that free flow money. So I know that you can't possibly know the answer, but there's been some question in the comments about why is it that the ZAP contracts and the migration contracts weren't audited? And it seems to be some contention from the team that this should have been included technically under the original audit. The focus of audits was new features. Any insight at all into that?
I can just I have no idea what the inner workings of Prisma audits and all that go. Of course, I'm over at Urine, so I can only speak to what we do at Urine. There's, I guess, very rare scenarios where you'd have like any sort of ongoing audit where there's some firm you pay one time up front and they repeatedly review your contracts. That's just not how it works. Each engagement with them is you're paying for the engineering hours, and typically they run somewhere around 20K for a week, and it's generally if you're doing pretty simple stuff, a lot of with experienced developers like there are at Prisma. It's maybe not always things don't need to get audited. With that being said, it's possible that they did get an audit. I simply don't know. But given the nature of the bug in here, I'm guessing it probably wasn't.
What it
really,
needs to be brought into the fold of extendable yet immutable, and once and then governance can either enable a migration from an input parameter previous trove, and the other param is the destination trove, and then governance defines the from and the to as params, and then it could be immutably immutable.
Yep. Yeah, and I think just judging by the design, once again, yeah, I wasn't privy to what the developers were thinking, but I can tell just looking at the code, they want it to be like maximally flexible and reusable, for the Trove managers that exist today and the ones that will exist in the future tomorrow. And it is a nice design. Of course, the problem is it just lacked a check, right? So like, I believe the whole thing could have been avoided if there was an extra line in there that asserted that the originator of the loan was that ZAP itself. But the way that the attacker got through is they originated the flash loan from their own malicious contract and then pointed the recipient to be the ZAP. So there wasn't a strict sort of one-to-one like originator recipient, and that's how they kind of bypassed the actual migration function that was intended to be called.
That's interesting. That makes sense.
How do you think this code of law paradigm is going? It sounds great in theory, but in practice, we're seeing that just like these like very tiny like slips lead to massive losses for people. Are we going to get to this utopia where code can serve as law?
Slow down the breaches, the financial losses. A lot of folks don't remember 2021. We're old at this point. That was, if people think this is the Wild West, whoo, billions were flying out the door back then. Absolutely crazy. But I would say this comes down to literally even individual developers' mode of operation, code of ethics. But that obviously is affected by whole team, and ultimately at some point this whole industry will be just product team versus dev team as it is in industry, like more traditional industry. And the devs, you need strong devs to say to the product team, no, that's not how you do things. That's what I do a lot. I tell them no, no, no. But with dealing with financial products, there's zero room for error, and that's why immutability, it, immutable mutability is what changes everything, because then it's deterministic. And you can have governance to a degree, but you even want to eliminate governance. You want the code to prove itself, and once it proves itself, that changes everything. That's the revolution, and that's what Satoshi did. And then that's the little bit of the short-sightedness in that type of conversation, maximalist camp, and immutability, and then you take it towards monetary policy, but then you extend it towards interest rates, and then you bring in the concept of credit, because we've never had anything like this. So it's remarkable. Well, we're here already, because you know what? I guess the best way to say it is everything we've done thus far is testnet. Everything. It's a mere foreshadow of what these systems are capable of at the scale and scope of an emerging market economy.
Or maybe another way of putting it is we got the past several years has been the 10,000 monkeys at 10,000 typewriters effect, where it turned out 9,999 of them were producing things with like a slight typo or correction that led to losses. But the ones that made it through, like that's sterling, and we could actually build on that one manuscript that happened to survive the past few years.
And think about like consumption standpoint. Um, where would macroeconomic forces deploy capital? Because they're thinking from a risk perspective also. They're going to deploy the protocols that have that trust eliminated, trustless, or the greatest degree of trustlessness. Look what Yearn's built and the degree of trust over these years. And frankly, the whole curve stack for that matter. But there's others. There's plenty of other protocols, and the ones that survive are going to do some interesting things in a $100 to $600 trillion capital expansion cycle.
Yeah, I keep seeing like Paxos deploying stable coins that's just reusing the like code from like Solidity ancient versions of which, and it's like, oh, I guess it makes sense, right? Like if Gemini USD doesn't get hacked, then it's good enough for just do it for a PYUSD.
There's
Wavey,
a reason the whole space. There's a reason the entire crypto space uses these synthetics emissions contracts. That's from late 2019 because it's trusted.
Wavy, Yearn was invoked, by the way, so I think you should tell us what's going on with Yearn. What are some of the cool new updates there?
Yes. There's so much going on. It's almost what was once uh, you know, this unified team around V2 vaults has really uh, become more decentralized and working on various new products, and it's almost hard to keep up at this point with everything going on. But so I can speak a little bit from my neck of the woods, which is on the Curve side. So we have, of course, our product YCRV, and and we do have a new product launch coming up. Uh, some people have been referring to it as YCRV version 2, and I hadn't thought about that till I saw someone call it that in the wild. But really, what it is it's the same, all the same tokens involved, but we're introducing a new staking contract. And one of the things users had uh, been transmitting to me and letting me know about is that they really want to have yield in the form of stable coins. So, so what this new staking contract is going to allow is basically two new features. One is yield in the form of stables, and then the second one is sort of this like new weight-based system that we came up with, where we are able to reward users, kind of skew more rewards to people who have been staking longer. Um, so there's basically from the time you deposit up until 5 weeks, your position is growing in weight, and all the way up until that 5 weeks when the growth stops, uh, you're going to be earning more and more rewards, uh, you know, per the amount that you have deposited. So the idea here, right, is we didn't, you know, Curve in VECRV has this locker system where you lock up and you can't withdraw, and you start with the maximum of up to 4 years wait and everything decays. We kind of turned that on its head and did the inverse of you deposit and then your weight grows over time instead of decays, and also built in such a way that there's no lockups, there's no withdrawal penalties, anything like that. We're purely just um, granting more rewards to people who have stuck around longer and are therefore more aligned with the protocol.
I like it.
I'm not sure
It-
which
it's
cap you're referring to, but I like it too.
it's all a product with branding and input versus output, and then that's going to garner a fair amount of attention. You know, that's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
it's
and
been such a long road with urine. You remember those days, Curve Cap, when urine was getting criticized for the just selling off Curve. The Bad Tech got so much heat over that, and it was just not understood. And it's such a fun story from hindsight. I'm not gonna tell the whole story, but it's all
Yeah.
about pressures and interested parties, and that is a consideration for Prisma. Anything that's an emissions-based protocol and protocol designs, tokenomics is economics to a degree, but it's also like expectations. It should be the expectation for an emissions pay based protocol that 100% of all emissions are sold because it's the worst possible scenario. And it's not going to be the scenario because some people are going to align with the protocol and want to hold it for investment or whatever purpose, speculative purpose. But if that's the assumption when designing an economic model, how do you counterbalance that? And that is where we're at actually organically, the Curve ecosystem, which is fascinating because, and just uh, uh, urine is a critical component of that because it contributes significant cell pressure with the vaults. You need federated protocols to buy deterministically, but they're incentivized to do it, and now existentially incentivized to do it because how many protocols have built their entire business model on this emissions protocol, continuing to do what it's going to do deterministically. No third party, no subjectivity, no person. It's going to do this in the future, no matter what anyone thinks. And now you have the constant cell pressure, you have deterministic buy pressure, you have a degree of equilibrium, and the rest of the market is defined by basically premiums and discounts and just speculation versus and fear in the market. So it's a fascinating chart of price action that's really a manifestation of all the protocol parties involved.
Yeah, the I definitely remember the phase you were talking about, and the like, in the same way that like you could see the glass is half full or half empty. For every seller, there's a buyer, and urine was just early at like providing the market for these protocols to step up, and I hope they got the cheap curve while they had the chance, because emissions are down quite a bit. That used to be the other big FUD against curve is that the emissions were too high, and then as it turns out that if you have the same depreciating schedule as Bitcoin, that criticism is not going to last, right?
No, not at all. It's heading in the right direction.
So yeah, I think Mitch's concept was kind of always like, look, we don't exactly know what the fair market value of these speculative tokens are because they're speculative and they have these premia, and we can't figure it out. So let's just have this predictable schedule and see where it finds its equilibrium. And as long as we keep reducing the inflation, then it's going to turn out pretty good.
But that's just the disinflation. That's just the determinism of the emission schedule. And the big thing that occurred that no one saw, no one saw it back when it was in hyperinflationary decay, was the consumers and and that was an organic emergence. And whence convex, that obviously changed everything. But then since then, it's dozens and dozens of protocols that are just sucking circulating supply, to the point where the best inspection of the current price chart is it should be straight down. And then why is it not? And that is the extraordinary economic phenomena that is not instantaneously digestible on the surface. It requires the comprehension of so many components of buy side, sell side, and at this point, vested interest and existential interest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think urine vaults are kind of, to some extent, they're like a dumping technology, right? They
Okay.
farm rewards and they dump, and they're agnostic about it, whether it's CRV or comp or whatever other token. And at least in my opinion, the holders of these tokens are, of course, justified. It's why would you want to see this industrial grade dumping of your token?
It
I would
exists
not be
because it
happy
needs to
about that
exist.
too. But yes, yeah, exactly. But at the same time, it exists. If urine wasn't there, there's a lot
Market,
of
yeah. Whenever there's a vacuum in the market, like convex came into existence because it needed to exist. Same thing with the urine vaults, like
yeah,
all these things. One
exactly.
more question before we move to some other breaking news that involves you. But first, I just want to get your opinion while we're on the subject of why CRV, since we have an expert here. Now, of course, like once markets turned bullish, buyers and sellers, like I see this as like a great YCRV buying opportunity. I believe I took advantage of it. Not everyone might agree, but why should people not panic about this chart? Why is YCRV going to repeg, or will it?
Oh, so it's a good question. I think the yield that the product gives is in line or better than competitors, and uh, with the features coming, I think that one of the long running complaints about YCRV is that all the earnings that you get as a user just come as auto compounded YCRV. So if you ever wanted to realize that or go use uh, your profits in the real world, you would then have to sell and do all that rather than holding what sometimes feels like a inflationary token that's kind of losing value sometimes. So I think giving stables is going to be more attractive. There's still going to be an option to auto compound. So now users have this optionality, this choice to pick how they want to earn. Um, and I think really the peg is just kind of a sign of confidence, given the fact that these all these wrappers are very competitive and are great products in their own right. One of the main things is just confidence, and um, that's what we hope is going to build over time. We had that an incident that people remember back in December where the multi-sig sold off a big portion of the LPs, and even though all the CRV that got pulled out of the pool during that transaction got replaced, even to a greater extent, so more CRV got put back into the pool. I think the reason for the peg to be lower than where it was back then is just a sign of confidence, and people just need to see the product executing successfully for some time, and I'm not too worried about it. So
All right.
They're not pegs. They never were. It's an organic
thank you. Yes,
arbitrage.
thank you for saying that. You're exactly right. And I think
They,
that as much as each one of these teams tries to show that in the docs and express that to users, anytime they interact with the product, people still expect that it's a one-to-one peg, but it's really not, right? Like the whole point of the product is that these tokens are getting locked forever so that they can earn max yield. But by entering the position, you're kind of betting on that yield and liquidity and all that kind of stuff. So it's not a one-to-one peg, and it never was and never will be. And um, uh, but there's still value in having these in these liquid lockers for
yeah,
people
an
who want that cash
18%
flow.
premium.
Yeah,
That is exactly why you grab the curve cap. The reason stake DAO is so close is because they're financing it, which isn't a bad thing. I don't mean that in a bad way. What Julian has done is uh, 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 leadership extraordinary for what he's done over the years with Stakedown and the pivots that team has done. But it's financed, it's incentivized with SDT. And then that means there's depreciation in SDT, or at least a depreciative force in the price point of that asset. Um, Obviously, convex to a degree as well, but things are going to be interesting with convex as their capacity to deficit finance is slowly and mathematically coming to an end. So it's going to be interesting. All these protocols have different properties and different considerations, and they're so financial, but they're also technological. But that chart is very obvious of why there's such a difference between CVX CRV, YCRV, and SD CRV.
Don't mean to keep shifting subjects, but Noah, we got some good news for you. You were hoping for a Prisma postmortem from the stellar authors of Urine, and they have delivered. So, Wavey, you've been multitasking, it seems, because while you've been chatting with us, you were also writing a comprehensive postmortem report that just got dropped. Could you walk us through this?
Oh man. Well, honestly, I think we covered sort of the points of the content in there itself, but a lot of credit to the guys at Llama Risk. They're excellent writers, much better writers than us. It reads very clearly. So anyone looking to get a better understanding and technical, detailed one of the attack, highly recommend this reading.
You know what I love about these postmortems? As a software dev myself, it's like all of this reduces to just input checks on function parameters. But this is the
Oh yeah.
detail. This is this is when us devs hear input checks on function parameters, we understand the causality, the the knock-on effects, the implications on subsequent algorithms and all the financial implications. And that's the whole point of a postmortem, is to consolidate everything into a robust documentation.
Well said. Well said. So yeah, the report looks very good at first blush. I look forward to diving into it, but I'm not smart enough to understand be able to try and pretend to carry on a conversation at your level and read it at the same time. So I haven't read it yet.
Yep.
Noah, I don't know how soon you have to jump, but I want to go through some of your recent tweets and see if you can kind of elaborate a bit more on some of them.
I got some time.
All right. So upcoming next week, I believe on Leviathan, we're going to be having the VE33 Aerodrome, Velodrome, Solidly Gigabrains joining.
They deserve it.
But you're asking who bought Arrow at $2. Are you saying that because you're jealous or because you disagreed with the trade? What's your thoughts on that?
Neither. I'm rational. Look at the technical chart. And I talk always about, are you buying at a premium or are you buying at a discount? And it certainly is a premium. You literally have comps on Optimism at a sixth the market cap. You have comps on Arbitrum at 100th the market cap. I'm not quite sure what's going on with Faro on Avalanche and Thana and Binance Smart Chain. It's all similar code base, and therefore, just the real estate analogy, comps. These are the comps. So what happens is market cap equilibrium over time, and that's all sentiment. It's not really risk. They all fall into a very similar risk category. All these are very mutable protocols. Um, and that's a consideration, and that just is really the state of the art, and which is interesting because all this started with Andre back in 21ish with V1, but what he came up with, and it all started with his documentation, was a lot of the stuff that he came up with, which was brilliant uh, conceptually in documentation form.
Cool.
in, in,
Is it
Initial
fair to
def-
say that they're comps though? Because on some level, you could argue that there's like, even if they're all the exact same protocols under the hood, which they're not, different teams, slightly different code. You could also argue that it's just like a bet on the base chain exploding. Like Coinbase has been announcing that they're going to be, I think, custodying and settling a lot more like USDC directly on the base chain, just to kind of
sure.
bring more liquidity there. Like, what if it's just a bet that like base is going to be 6 times bigger in the not too distant future?
Yeah, but quite reasonable. Um, Look at the depth and richness of the financial infrastructure. Base is an ascent. It even Solana has more robust infrastructure, and Solana has much more dollars. Base has recently been running up on dollars extraordinary. It was like a 300-400 mil, and now it's like 1.1 bill. So these are changing properties. The overwhelming majority of it's not even financial products, of speculative products on Base are there's nothing. It's vapor. It's all meme coins, and there's value in meme coins. There's value in culture, so on and so forth. But I talk about financial products, and financial products are in basically three categories: credit, foreign exchange, and derivatives. Foreign exchange is manifested in crypto markets in terms of AMMs, exchanges. In that regard, Aerodrome runs Base. It is the prime expression of Base, and that's meaningful. Is it at a premium or a discount? It's at a premium. I wouldn't buy it at this price. If you bought it at 5 mil market cap, great. It's going to come down in price, and great if it goes up in price. It's irrelevant. It's my method or my rules of engagement with these systems from an investor standpoint. I don't buy at a premium, and that's okay. And that's okay if it goes up. I buy things at a discount. And any real estate investor would say, all right, look at the comps. All right, so the one that screamed out was Ramsey's. Oh, Ramsey's is up 200-300% in the last couple of days. It's got to find equilibrium with Velodrome at 100 mil market cap on Optimism, and Optimism is another story because it has synthetics fundamental architecture, and that's really what drove a lot of Optimism expansion. So it has a lot of financial tooling from a derivative standpoint, not too much from a credit standpoint, but clearly it also has exchange infrastructure, but it's not as robust. Neither Base nor Optimism are as robust as Arbitrum. Arbitrum is probably the interesting destination for Curve, and it's going to have much more financial infrastructure as compared to the Optimism superchains, at least in the short term. And it also has more dollars. Arbitrum has 3 point something billion dollars. So dollars are everything because dollars are, dry powder, as some would say. But that's the foundation for all transactions. So I inspect and measure these markets in terms of dollars, and that's where maximum opportunity is. So Arbitrum was screaming out as being mispriced, the V33 expression on Arbitrum. So Andre nailed it. And he nailed a lot of things. He nailed urine. Everything. Look, Phantom. Oh my God, he's he shouldn't have done the coding entirely the way he did it. We all lost a lot of money, but that needs to be respected as being independent from what he did from an idea standpoint. Uh, there's only several truly innovative financial things that have emerged in the crypto markets. I mean, you could argue just like independent self-sovereign tokenization, where literally you could create a currency out of nothing, and then whole conversation of what the hell is a currency and how is value ascribed to things. But like time locks on Bitcoin, immutable monetary policy, voter escrow, uh, real-time adaptive monetary policy, and these types of credit conversations that we've had. Um, these are the extraordinary things, and VE is V33 is extraordinary because of the alignment of incentives. 100% of LP fees go to the voter, so there's your incentive there. And then LP depth is deficit financed by emissions. Deficit spending is, I would most commonly talk about it. It's an iteration.
So I, a lot of points there. The one I want to drill down on is this optimism versus arbitrum, because I always like from the beginning was in the arbitrum camp, just because it like seemed technologically like superior to me than optimism. I thought optimism's gonna be dead in the water, but I'm surprised. I'm almost like recalibrating lately because of the super chain, like as we see more optimism clones like base and fractal getting deployed, like I can kind of like make the argument in my head that okay, like a giant federation of like all these things combining powers could be more powerful than Arbitrum, because Arbitrum they just brought on anime chain into the kind of Arbitrum. I'm not sure like I'm not sure whether like anime tokens, whatever this is like going to be competing with like the seriousness of like fractals and stuff like that. I don't know. Urine doesn't deploy on side chains at all, right? Wavy?
You have us to the point.
Uh, yeah, we have on quite a few, but
Okay.
it's urine is only ever as good as the farms available to it. So,
hmm
a lot of the major farms that can handle large TVL exist on mainnet, of course, and that's been
And
kind of born
Curve
away.
also is like mostly mainnet, even though it has like
Yeah.
deployed on all these other side chains. It's like 90% of its TVL's mainnet, so it's like very myopic. I don't say want to say myopically focused on it, but like conditions just require it's like mostly focused on mainnet.
There's the opportunity, and it's going to be a fascinating landscape. Mainnet rules. Mainnet is where all the dollars are. The only thing that comes close is Tron, and Tron is not East. It's not Western DeFi. It's more Eastern Tether settlement in meat space. And then comes Binance Smart Chain from a dollar standpoint. So they're still in there. They have relatively high transaction fees compared to what Denkun achieved, but it's kind of irrelevant. You're at 40, 50 cents. It's kind of comparable to Avalanche in many regards. Um, look what just released as an L3 on base with settlement on base, execution on an an Arbitrum super chain, and then data availability on yet another chain. Folks, you gotta extrapolate a couple of years into the future. This is gonna get weird, guys. If it gets so weird, you're not gonna know what chain you're operating on, and you're not gonna need to. And look at that's where urine's heading. You're gonna jam it in a vault, and it's gonna be sucking liquidity and giving you dollar yield from 20 different chains, and you're not even gonna know, and you're gonna settle and have your finality on mainnet where all the money's going to live, and because it's a relative risk world. But they look, Arbitrum has the same narrative as the superchain narrative, but Fractal is interesting. That might be the most interesting expression of the superchain, because the world runs on incentives. Everything you do, if any of you viewers take away like big points from what I say, think about everything you do, and you will find an incentive. I mean, just standing up because your back hurts. You're standing up because you're incentivized because your damn back hurts. Or you get a cup of coffee because you're tired, or you eat something because you're hungry and you don't want to fall asleep. I don't know. Come on, just find the incentive. So the point is, the amount of incentives and percentage signs, because it's all psychological, are haven't been achieved yet on Fractal, and the best is yet to come, as we could say. So those percentage signs are going to be quite fascinating, and I think that's extraordinary from an optimism superchain perspective.
Well, I saw Leviathan points deployed onto Fraxtal, so that makes me super bullish on Fraxtal. But
That's just the tip. The point. There's going to be so many points. There's points everywhere.
um, so I like to like mostly LARP as a like on mainnet and pretend I'm a whale, even though I'm like very poor. So I don't actually follow the side chains as much as I should. But when you talk about this idea that like it's all going to be kind of invisible under the hood, is there such like what's the state of like the if this even exists of like chain aggregators? Is it like possible that I could like combine multiple like chains worth of liquidity into like some sort of like umbrella? And because there's always talk about the liquidity fragmentation being the problem, there's a few million there, a billion there, but the more chains you get, the more it gets like diffused. And if
Well,
you
you
want
have
to
the
like run like
messaging.
there's
So you
messaging,
have,
but can
that's
you
the start of it, because you still have the liquidity fragmentation. I mean, really, where that the only one that could, there's only two protocols that could cure the liquidity fragmentation, because otherwise you do still have the siloed liquidity. Um, you can have a curve pool on Arbitrum and a curve pool on mainnet, and using one of the cross-chain messaging protocols, you can facilitate a swap. What? Anyway, well, AWA is the protocol that does the cross curve. So that's an actual protocol. It exists right now. Did you know about AWA?
I'm pulling them up right now. It's EYWA, right?
Yeah,
Know a
it's
little
a
bit about them.
cross curve. And what fundamentally the only way that's technologically achievable is you have liquidity on two chains, and the cross-chain messaging, you establish finality, you do your proofs on both chains, and then you execute the transaction. Um, but so that it's still liquidity fragmented. So it's CCIP and obviously layer zero. Um, so that's literally only two. That the destination is these omni-chain fungible tokens, which would be like this omni-chain tokenized representation of liquidity on various chains. So it doesn't really solve fragmentation liquidity, at least that I see right now. But at least you have this cross-chain representation of liquidity on different chains. And that's kind of a step in the right direction um, for now.
Good stuff. Good stuff. What are the other like things out there that you don't buy things that are at a premium? Is there anything out there because you nailed Ramses? You were saying, what have you been talking about with people off camera or on camera about like projects you find interesting that you think might have that discount?
DPIN's a big deal. Definitely going to be. So right now, my general sentiment of the market is repricing. So what does that mean? We haven't had the currency expansion cycle in macroeconomics. So we haven't even started the cycle, which is fascinating because that's not really the prevailing argument, but it's literally what the data says. So what we have is a mean regression. Mean regressions happen from the downside and the upside, and clearly, and the greatest way to inspect this is from the Bitcoin chart and looking at like the 3-month time weighted average price, right down the middle of the average price. And when you go below it, you mean regress to the upside, and we've overshot to the upside. You could have a downside dip, or the bubble could keep going. Anything above the average price is a bubble by definition, eventually to mean regress to the average. So I'm very picky in owning things, and there's not much left that hasn't repriced already. Um, DPIN's a big deal, but I think that's just repricing. But it's going up against the big boys. You're going up against cloud compute, AWS, Azure. Cartesi is a big deal. The ability to execute in an a Linux environment with on-chain data availability and finality. That's quite fascinating. If you could execute Python and store the data in whatever cheap DA chain, that's crazy. Now you're talking about cloud storage and cloud compute executed with a degree of determinism, or just like a immutable state. It's quite fascinating. Aleph, which is on-chain Python of sorts. So those are big things. But the most important thing that people get hung up on with investing is they go to a narrative. It's not just narrative. You got to understand the whole picture and time horizon. These things have massive time horizons, and you're not going to get to where things will be in short order, and that means you're going to have opportunity cost. Um, so that's why the biggest thing is still the financial products. And it's bigger. It's still bigger. The financial products that everyone is bored to death with is still bigger than the AI narrative and the DPIN narrative and the meme coins. And you talk about credit and foreign exchange and dollars. Everyone is bored to death with this stuff, but you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of trillions of dollars that they already are interested in these credit products and the capacity to execute foreign exchange, getting rid of people at the settlement layer. That's crazy. This is banking. By definition, these are banks in an emerging market. So folks have to take that for what it's worth because it is what it is.
Yeah, what you're talking about makes me think a little bit of Project Mariana. Have you been following that one?
Hey, of course.
Just drop that there. Wavey, what are you paying attention to these days? Oh, Wavey went to go make a sandwich.
It's getting close to that time, but no, I think we, you know, I think the thing that's got me most excited is just this move towards almost like relying on these economic incentives to do things like complete swaps for you. I mean, a lot of it started with the technology behind cow swap and these auction markets to complete user trades in a trustless way. And now we're seeing uh, several protocols. I mean, probably the most famous one recently is Uniswap and their mechanism for how they're going to sell off trading fees into ETH, I think it was. Um, so basically the fee switch mechanism that they have, but they've found a totally permissionless way to do these Dutch auction sales of any kind of obscure token that might happen to be in a pool. So we're when they announced that, it's funny because Yearn had simultaneously, like, we've been working on something very similar, um, because of course Yearn vaults and strategies do a lot of token dumping, right? And we want to do this in like a maximally permissionless way, and a great way to do that is through these Dutch auctions. Basically, you advertise this price that is decreasing block by block until it meets some market equilibrium, and a bot comes in and buys it off the books. So um, it's really exciting to me just to see the various ways which people are building in these market incentive mechanics to complete work for them on chain. Um, and it's kind of becomes this game of like these MEV bot operators just learning about these opportunities and optimizing their infrastructure on their side to to fulfill all these orders. Um, so yeah, looking forward to what the future brings with that type of thing.
Huge. You're talking about clearing houses and the settlement of everything, everything they do and like what they're doing with the bond market and central clearing, and you, this stuff gets rid of all the infrastructure, all the people that suck fees in between, and you replace it with fees, but the fees are deterministic based on rules. And literally, the U.S. goes around the world screaming the rules-based order. That is the epitome of what this space is. Determinism changes everything. Uh, it sets expectations. Imagine if like Fed monetary policy was under these conditions, this will occur. X, Y, Z, A, B, C. And here's your rule sheet. That's literally what the deterministic smart contracts do. And it's literally the boring story of a decaying emission schedule, a disinflationary monetary policy. It's rules. And the boring shit is the most exciting stuff, and people just glance over it.
Well, people don't have a sense of scale, right? It's like when the DeFi market was about 10 times the size of the NFT market, but everyone's paying attention to all the crazy NFTs, even though it's the boring DeFi market that was the interesting one, in my opinion. All right. Gents, I've been picking your brain for too long. Anything final, like you want to get off your chest or shout out while we're still going live here?
Good topics. Best
No, it was
topic.
Yeah.
blast having all of you here. Yeah, hope you could join more often anytime you got something you want to shout out or announce, or just if you want to come kick it with us. We like to keep these llama parties on Friday fun and informal, and just just have some fun. So where should people find you?
Captain Rational on X. I do the YouTube thing too, but when I do the stream, it goes to X and YouTube now. This old man is getting all tech savvy with the StreamYard thing, so that's pretty cool. So I talk and I just keep it rational. And clearly, I'm an engineer. I do Android development, and so I understand the nature of software and patterns and structures, and not just the primitives, but I understand the financials and what folks like Wavey do at the from an economic standpoint at the smart contract level, and implications of trust and necessity for modularity and decoupling things and so on and so forth. So that's my story. I keep it rational, fellas.
And you still managed to undersell yourself. Absolutely 100% the best live streamer on the planet. So definitely check those out. Wavey, where should people find you?
Yeah, just I guess on Twitter, Wavey0x. That's the place.
Or behind YCRV. So every time you're transacting YCRV, you think of Wavey.
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
There you go.
Friends, another successful llama party in the book. Today is Friday, March 29th, and we'll see you all next tide.